From MTN, the Montana Television Network, this is Face the State.
Hello and welcome to this week's edition of Face the State. I'm Jonathan Ambarian. 2020 marks the 75th anniversary of the end of World War II. Over the last few years, there have been a number of commemorations of key milestones in that conflict. Just last month, there was a particularly significant anniversary for Montana, the deactivation of the 1st Special Service Force. The force, also known as the Black Devils or Devils Brigade, was an elite American and Canadian unit trained in unconventional warfare, and it got its start in the Treasure State at Fort Harrison just outside Helena. Over the next half hour, we'll take a closer look at what the 1st Special Service Force accomplished and how the legacy of its fighting men continues. I'm joined by two guests. Bill Woon is with the 1st Special Service Force Association, an organization that shares the unit's stories. Ray Reed is the director of the Montana Military Museum at Fort Harrison, which hosts an extensive exhibit about the force. Well, gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us today. So, Mr. Woon, if you could tell us a little bit about what is it that led up to the creation of the 1st Special Service Force? It was really an unusual unit for its time.
It was the first of its kind in unconventional warfare, in commando training and fighting. But we have to go back a little bit in history to 1939, 1938. The Nazi Party had taken control of Germany. Germany had been building their war machine for 10 years after Hitler took power. And they had created an army of over 2.5 million men, a navy and air force that was dominant in the world. And beginning in 1939, they moved into Poland, took Poland. At that time, Finland, a little side story, Finland aligned themselves with Germany because Russia needed a northern route into Germany. So Finland was fighting Russia. Russia had just completed a war or ended a war with Japan. And Japan and Germany had aligned as the Axis powers, eventually Italy. But Winston Churchill knew after Germany had walked across the European continent that they were next. And he needed to come up with a tactic or a strategy to try to defend England long enough to get the United States involved. The United States, coming off of World War I, really wasn't sure they wanted to get into the war. So it was Winston Churchill and Lord Mountbatten and a project called Project Plough, which was a concept by an English scientist who felt that you could fight wars in the snow the way you fight wars at sea if you have the right equipment and the right men. And at that time, Norway was occupied by Germany. Norway was supplying all the hydroelectric power to Germany for their factories. But the key that they were looking at and watching was Germany's advancement of what they called the super bomb, which was the atomic bomb. And the deuterium to refine the uranium down to weapons grade was coming out of Norway. They were also refining and perfecting jet propulsion and rocket propulsion. So the Allies knew that if Germany perfected the atomic bomb and perfected a delivery system, that there was no defense. And so Winston Churchill and Lord Mountbatten came to the United States to ask for the United States assistance in defending themselves until the Allies could land in Europe. And this was even before the United States got into the war. December 7th, 1941, we all know that date. Japan attacked Pearl Harbor. December 8th, the United States declares war on Japan. December 11th, Germany and Italy declare war against the United States. So now the United States is in the war. And the creation of this unit was top secret. At that time, conventional warfare was still big armies fighting big armies. So the concept of a small, specialized commando type unit, there was no manual. It was being created. It was being invented as they went along. The concept was analyzed by the Pentagon. It was brought over to President Roosevelt and George C. Marshall. A lieutenant colonel by the name of Robert T. Frederick, a West Point graduate artilleryman, was given the task of analyzing the concept of landing in Norway in commando warfare of eliminating these hydroelectric plants and heavy water plants. And Lieutenant Colonel Frederick's analysis was you can't do it. they had a way of getting the men in, they had no way of getting them out. The attrition rate was estimated at 90%, which means it was a suicide mission, and 10% of the men may be able to survive. But the biggest reason that it was a no-go was that they couldn't get the men over there without Germany and the German soldiers knowing they were coming. They had radar. It was going to take an armada of aircraft that didn't exist at that time. The Lancaster was the only aircraft that could get them in. So long story short was Colonel Frederick said, no, you can't do it. Winston Churchill, Prime Minister Churchill, and George C. Marshall, General Marshall, and Lord Mountbatten felt that they had to create enough time to delay the invasion of England by the German Army and German Navy. So they wanted a hit and run type of unit that would infiltrate, operate behind enemy lines, and buy enough time to build a defense in England to defend against what was considered the inevitable invasion.
So at this point then, the US has entered the war and they're starting to look at whether they can put a unit like this together. How did it end up that they not only brought these people together, but they brought them together here in the state of Montana?
The concept was very much enticing to Winston Churchill, Prime Minister Churchill, as well as the US military. So the US military, and at that time Canada was a Commonwealth of England, agreed that it would be a joint effort, that it would be US and Canadian. And Canada committed half of the combat echelon that would train, but it was always this first time multinational unit. The interesting part of this is the Canadians were always in the Canadian Army. And so they were serving under US command. Colonel Frederick, because of his knowledge of this entire concept, even though it was a no-go analysis, was given command. They needed a base to train. They needed a base that was remote, that was going to be similar in weather and similar in terrain to Norway. And the post that was available was Fort William Henry Harrison, west of Helena, Montana. And so they started coming out. The orders were actually cut for the unit on July 9th, 1942. It stood up in Helena at Fort Harrison on July 20th, 1942, and men started arriving in Helena early in mid-August by train, traveling across the United States and Canada to train. And they were given a timeline of 5 months to have this unit combat ready.
Now, when the unit came together in Fort Harrison, what is it that this training looked like? It was intensive, was it not?
It was intense. And one failure, and you were sent back to the unit that you came from. I haven't seen any official numbers, but I was told by one of the veterans that 16,000 men volunteered for the force and 2,200 made the cut. But as soon as they landed boots on the ground in Helena, trains across Canada rallied in Calgary and then got on trains in Calgary. Remember, all these trains were blacked out. These men didn't know where they were going. They just knew that they had volunteered and had been accepted into this specialized unit. For a lot of them, the enticement was airborne training, and they got a little extra pay. They got a little bump in pay. But they didn't know the mission, and they didn't know where they were headed, and they wound up in Helena, Montana. There's a rail spur that goes right into the post there. Their first exposure to this type of training was airborne. And Colonel Frederick, he was promoted to a full colonel, and he was an incredible man that was one of those leaders and expected it from his officers that he wouldn't ask his men to do anything he wouldn't do himself. But their first training or their first exposure to the test of whether they could make the cut was airborne. And parachuting at that time, 1942, was fairly new. The technique was new. The training center for it was Fort Benning, Georgia. And so some of the trainers, some of the instructors that came up here had some airborne training, but most of these men had never even ridden on an airplane, let alone jumped out of one. And ordinarily, airborne training at Fort Benning is about 4 to 5 weeks. These men got 4 to 5 days of training. They showed you how to put on the harness. They had a couple mock-ups that you would jump out of a plywood mock-up, and then they would pick you up in a harness and drop you to show you what the impact was going to be like. Then you got on the airplane, and you went up and jumped out, or didn't jump out.
There were people who did not.
Yeah.
Refused to jump from the door. We were reading the other day, they used to have a tally at the bottom of the day, how many people jumped, how many people were injured, how many people went through the training. And they only required 2 jumps to qualify.
Mm-hmm.
Today it's 5 jumps at Fort Benning, and normally they'll try to get a 6th jump in. But they were, you know, and I always remember the discussion that Colonel Frederick went through his training. He had low quarters on in his Class A's. He went out and jumped twice, and that was it. Mm-hmm. He was done. He then supervised everybody else to go through the training. So,
Mm-hmm.
And lots of broken legs.
yes,
The technique was a little different back then. They taught them to jump with their feet apart, thinking that you would land equally on one leg or the other, or both legs, but it didn't work that way. You were usually oscillating a little bit, come down on one leg, a lot of broken legs. And from the film that was created in the filming of this training, because again, there was no manual. They were creating this as they went. Went back to Fort Benning, and they analyzed it and realized that the technique had to change from feet apart to feet together.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the
And that's
technique they use today.
What they'll go with even today. Now, of course, like we said, there was very high secrecy around this, but there was occasionally some interaction between the men in the force and the people in Helena. I know we've seen there's a photo of them walking down Last Chance Gulch here. That was a famous photo that we've seen down at the Military Museum. What other interactions were there with the locals here?
Well, the Helena people knew that the unit was out there. Again, top secret. They didn't know the mission. They weren't aware of the unit. Just a little side note: First Special Service Force gives the impression that it was an entertainment group, like the USO.
right.
Since then, that service name has taken out, and the active unit today is First Special Forces. But Helena adopted these men. They would come out and watch them jump. They would come out on Sundays and gather the men up, take them to church, take them home for dinner. These men loved Helena because Helena welcomed them with open arms. Mm-hmm. And a lot of these men married local girls mm-hmm. and came back to Helena. But Helena is the home, and to the veterans still living, it still is the home mm-hmm. that they remember going back to.
So after, was it 5 months? That was what it was scheduled for. What did it end up being for their time training?
Well, they were in the training, and the training to all of these men, the level of training and the level of conditioning was key to their survival. After the airborne training, then they got into weapon systems, hand-to-hand combat, night warfare, winter warfare, mountain climbing, all of those tools. They really didn't know exactly what they were getting into. They knew the terrain. But the belief was that we need to train these men for whatever will come in front of them. So they continued to train through the fall up until November, and the decision was made to not use the unit to go into Norway for Project Plow for a couple reasons, but the mission was given to the Norwegian underground, and eventually those plants were destroyed by the Norwegian underground. So now we're in the political environment of what do you do with this unit? Should we keep it going? Canadians, should we send the Canadian soldiers back to Canada? Send these men back to their units that they came from in the United States? And Colonel Frederick, now seeing the concept and seeing what was being developed and what was being created, went back to Washington and advocated with the command, because again, this is all unconventional, to keep the unit alive, keep it going, keep creating this concept of unconventional warfare. Mm-hmm. So they continued to train through the winter in skiing in all of those different areas. And in April, that iconic picture of them marching down Last Chance Gulch, April 6th, 1943, they left Helena and went out to the East Coast for amphibious landing training to mm-hmm. add that ability. Mm-hmm. to their wheelhouse and
Yeah.
the types of missions they could take.
And of course, they didn't end up going into Norway after all. Their first mission was, I guess, out in the Aleutian Islands on the Pacific side, but that ended up not being maybe as serious as they initially expected. They really made their fame in Italy in 1943.
43, they
Yes.
did. The Japanese were occupying the islands, the outlying islands of the Aleutian chain. The force was, after their amphibious landing training, went back to the west coast and boarded ships to go up to Amchitka, and eventually the invasion of Kiska, which the Japanese were occupying. There had been some pretty bloody battles up there, and so they anticipated that this one was also going to be a very nasty battle. But the Japanese had pulled their soldiers off of Kiska under fog and darkness, and so it was a dry run for the force. But it was really a good test of their abilities and their training, and they performed excellently.
They were utilized. Were able to utilize all the equipment they utilized in Europe, in that regard. So it turned out very well.
And then,
Go ahead.
sorry, in Italy, we don't have time to go into, unfortunately, the full breadth of all that they accomplished in there. They accomplished quite a bit over not even a full year, I guess. But what are the biggest takeaways of what they were able to do in Italy during the battles that they fought there, starting in Monte La Defensa?
Well, they landed in Italy on November 19th, 1943. The Allied army had pushed their way up the boot of Italy and ran into what was called the Winter Line, or the Gustav Line, and it was a series of defensive lines across the middle of Italy. They had fought for weeks to try to clear the Germans off this high ground, and they couldn't. So when the force landed, the fact that they had mountain training, they had this winter survival training. Now we're into November, December in Italy, in the mountains of Italy. Weather is getting pretty harsh. Lieutenant General Mark Clark wanted the 1st Special Service Force to clear the southernmost mountain, which was Monte La Defensa. And so the force, with their mountain training in Helena, were given that task. And they climbed the cliffs in the dark, in the middle of the night, in the snow and the rain, and cleared off that mountaintop in about 4 hours. And then spent the next 6 weeks clearing off other mountaintops in Italy. They went in with the combat echelon of 1,800 men, and when they came out on January 17th of 1944, there were fewer than 500 that got on the trucks. So weather and wounds and those killed in action had depleted their strength significantly.
Yes, they suffered grievous losses, but they achieved all of their objectives in breaking through that line there. Well, after the Winter Line, they continued fighting in Italy in some other big battles. What was the big thing that they were accomplishing in what they did in Italy?
Once they came out of the mountains, went into Anzio, and the strategy, because one of the questions that I've always asked myself was why did the Allies spend so much time and effort fighting in Italy when the strategy was to have a landing on Europe and push through Europe back to Germany? Well, it was to detract as many German soldiers away from the Normandy area, away from the European theater. That was part of it. The other part of it was the liberation of Rome, the liberation of Italy, the liberation of southern France. But Anzio was where they really got their name as the Black Devils, because they utilized all of the training that they had received in Helena, in fighting at night, in infiltrating behind enemy lines. And for 99 days, that's what they did. On the right flank, they had a strength now of about 1,800 men. They were fighting or facing 12,000 men of the Hermann Göring Division. And their night patrols just raised havoc with the German soldiers.
And the nicknames, they came from the Germans themselves, because they caused quite a bit of consternation for the
They did.
German
They were
forces.
experts at night fighting. They were experts at stealth. They had been trained in Helena to fight in that environment. And that, again, that was the unconventional piece of this. And so the German officer that they found in his diary, these Black Devils, was that we never see them, we never hear them, we just see the effects of them being here. Mm-hmm. That's where they came up with what I call their calling card. Mm-hmm. It was a spearhead, which was their shoulder patch, with the words Das Decke an der Kampf nach, which in German means the worst is yet to come. So they implemented their psychological warfare that was very effective in Anzio.
Certainly, all through the First Special Service Forces imagery, you see all of those spearhead, arrowheads, all through that, and all of the stuff that you have there in the museum. I remember specifically there's a stone that was found in one of the mountains there that's roughly in the shape of that, patch.
They actually brought a piece back from Mount La Defensa in one of the commemorations that was done in 2006. The Canadian History Channel came down here and filmed a 4-hour block and then took the group that they had consolidated between Canadian and American modern special forces and modern soldiers. They went through the training here at Fort Harrison, and then they took them over and actually took them onto the battlefield at Mount La Defensa. And when they got to the top, they found items that they thought would be interesting. They brought them back. And so we have a number of those items that are on display in that one exhibit based on that. It's such a unique thing because we have special forces units that come in all the time. They come to Montana to train, and they always make a soiree into the museum to see their lineage and honors, because they're everything that they do today is still followed through with some of those tactics that were developed by this unit. Utilizing enemy weapons, utilizing the land, utilizing stealth is still done today, and that's why it's so important. So they come here and they train, and they hopefully go to those same areas and retool. So they do mountaineer training, they do water training out on the Missouri River, on the lakes, they parachute in the mountains. They do all of the different things. They do demolitions training here. Everything that the force developed during their probably about 8 months of work here in Helena. You can imagine how intense that is, because a lot of times they're only here for a couple of weeks, but it's 24/7 kind of training when they come here.
Yeah, and that really is something that I think people should take away, is that the First Special Service Force today, you still see the lineage of it even in the modern special forces to a great extent. I know they sort of see that as their precursors in some way.
Well, in 1960, when President Kennedy reconstituted special forces, the first special forces unit that now headquarters out of Fort Bragg, they tied direct lineage from those units that were being stood up at that time back to the First Special Service Force. So in military records, in Department of Army records, that lineage is established and has been recognized.
Well, obviously, as we said, they had a lot of battles that they went through, and a lot of difficult missions that they went on. What did you think is the number one thing that people should take away from what it is that the First Special Service Force did, what they accomplished, and what they left behind?
You know, I think they were pioneers first of all, they volunteered for this unit. And the demands on the individual, both physically and psychologically, were intensive. That's why 22 men out of 16,000 men made the cut. And in special forces today, there's a selection process. Not everybody is not everybody is prepared to operate in that environment. But the commitment that they had, the brotherhood that they created, General Frederick, again, was a master he didn't keep the Canadian and U.S. soldiers separate. He integrated them and utilized the competitive nature of these alpha males in everything they did, in training, in combat, and when they deactivated on December 5th of '44. Most of the men didn't know who was Canadian and who was U.S. That was how close that bond had been developed.
And after the war was over, some of these men ended up coming back. Well, they all returned to their home countries, some of them actually came back to Montana and made their homes here.
About 40 men came back and established themselves and moved to Helena and raised their families here. We have sadly lost all of those men. There are still 63 men living that served in the force, and of the 63, 17 actually trained here at Fort Harrison, 4 Canadians and 13 U.S. soldiers.
Well, it's obviously something that the Fort Harrison to this day takes a great deal of pride in.
Absolutely, they're a mainstay of the museum. They're only a small portion of our whole story, but they seem to dominate everything. And if you take a look, in the city of Helena, we have the memorial. And they chose to set the memorial here in Memorial Park. In 1947, they had I think it was their first reunion, came back here and established the memorial. And it's been, they continued to work on that. They added the cenotaph to that memorial, which has, I think, around 500 names on it. And down in the bottom corner, it says, "Those who dared survived," but survived. But there's all those names are on there, and they recognize their brethren that didn't make it home. I think we'd like to recommend that everybody has a chance to come out to the museum, take a look at that, and we can expand on the exhibits. Most of the exhibits were done by 1st Special Service Force members who lived here in town or in the area during the formative years of the museum. We asked them to actually write the story and put the exhibits together, and we followed through with whatever they wanted to have. So the story is really their story.
Yeah. And how is it that people, if they're interested in learning more about these stories, how is it that they can come and visit you at the Military Museum on Fort Harrison?
We're there on Thursdays. We're an all-volunteer group, so we open up on Thursdays, but we do open up other times, and all they have to do is request separate times. We have people who come in all during the week, on weekends. During the summertime, we have a lot of Canadian folks that come down, and they always call ahead, and we can always set up a time for them to come into the museum. We have a great gift shop, and a large part of that gift shop is the books and texts, information of the force. We've collected those just for that purpose, and those you can't tell the whole story. They need to sit down and actually read that story a little bit. But we're learning more even today about the force, and those small stories are starting to come forward that we never had before. The large story was always there. The small stories, the individual stories, are coming out because the families will come in and say, "This is my grandfather, this was my uncle,"
All right.
along that way.
Well, very good. Well, thank you very much, both of you, for joining us this morning and sharing some of the stories and the importance that the 1st Special Service Force has both here in Montana and on a wider scale. And thank you all very much for joining us on Face the State. Please tune in next week for our next edition of Face the State.